Cool. We rolling?
I think so.
Westwood started when I couldn't find stuff that I liked writing with. The inspiration behind Westwood is doing stuff that sounds alternative, that sounds different, that sounds not perfect, but like there's a real player in front of you. And never to try and perfectly recreate like, oh, this is exactly what a violin sounds like, and you can control it down to the nth degree. Let there be some randomness and some chaos within the samples, so the realism is built into the samples. The first process was really difficult because I'd sampled stuff before, I'd done small stuff like everybody does, and then when I was like, okay, I'm going to do something that I actually want to give out and, you know, show publicly, it was horrifying because this note that I'm about to play on the piano is going to get heard by hundreds of people, hopefully thousands of people. It was terrifying, but really exciting at the same time. It was a day of recording studio where I was like, this is the start now. This is what's going to be my life now for the next foreseeable future. The instruments we record, the sounds that we make, the sounds that we get the performers and the players to make are largely influenced by like music that I'm listening to, soundtracks that I'm listening to, and I'm going, oh, I'd love that sound in a sample library. I'd love to be able to use that sound somewhere, and it just isn't available. The hardest thing about sample libraries and running Westwood is, for me, is brain switching. Because Westwood is a small company, it's only a few people involved in the whole process. I do brain switching 3 or 4 times a day where I'm going from editing samples and like listening to stuff and going, oh, okay, can we make this one better, to editing contact instruments, to then looking at websites, to then managing the finances and talking to my accountant, to then listening to other things that people have done, to then customer service. So like for me personally, it is the brain switching that I'm always doing. With sample libraries as a whole, the hardest thing is doing something that hasn't been done before. So that's more conceptual. That's more like, how can we record, you know, violins and violas and cellos and brass instruments and all that kind of stuff has been done loads of times before, and everybody's reaching for the pinnacle of sample library development, and I'm not on that path. I'm like, how can we do it differently that is new and original, and people will want what is going to be the next thing that Westwood does. Software that's really good for sample library development is basically any DAW. It doesn't really matter. They all sound the same, regardless of what any person online tells you. Just use whatever DAW you're comfortable with. And then some sort of noise reduction software, because when you're stacking multiple samples, you're stacking noise floors. So it's good to just reduce, and that's to taste, like how much you actually reduce. But Isotope is what we use, and then it's basically whatever sampler you put all of those programs into, all of those samples into. We use Contact. Contact is just really solid and really good. Probably the #1 piece of software that we use is Google Sheets to keep everything organized, because when you're working with tens of thousands of samples and lots of different versions of instruments, you kind of just need to keep everything in check. So I would say Google Sheets is the #1 piece of software that you need. User feedback is really important. We do listen to everything everybody says. So every DM, whether I manage to reply to it or not, I do read everything. Everything goes on a whiteboard. I talk about the whiteboard loads online and with people and emails. And the whiteboard is a genuine thing where just everything just gets shoved in, whether it's a good idea, bad idea. You don't know it's a good idea until it's actually been materialized. I sort of like kick myself when I call bad ideas, because I don't think they are bad until it's a reality, and then you know whether it's bad or good. So yeah, user feedback is vital, because ultimately it's those people that are using the end products. The one where I was like, oh, okay, I think we know what we're doing now is the Viola in Viola Untamed. I think it's sentimental reasons, because it was just at the back of COVID and lockdown, and everybody was like, needs to get back in a recording studio again. These guys here at the Nave were like, yeah, we can do it again if we take the precautions. Got Henry in to record the viola, and that was definitely a moment where I was like, oh, okay, I can go again now. And it was obviously at the very birth of the company where it wasn't a sure thing that Westwood was going to go, and then everybody got locked down, and I was, okay, how are we going to survive? Like, I've got a mortgage to pay and kids to look after. The day we got back in the recording studio and I heard a viola, and like, okay, we're going again. So maybe it's not the best one, but it's the one that relives that moment in my life where I was like, okay, things are okay. We can go again. I think the most requested product is a choir. People are like, are you going to do a choir? And I think that's because just people love choirs. The best parts of the production process are the beginning and the end. It's the ideation, where you're getting excited about ideas and like, oh, what could this be? And the potential for the end product. It's like when you're making an album, the potential for the end result is infinite. This could be anything, and that's the exciting part. And then the end, when it's done, phew, everything's worked, it all sounds good, nobody died, this is all good, it sounds great, and you're about to release it. The middle bit is just this stressful months and months where it's just like, is this gonna work? How is it gonna work? And it's a bit like having a haircut. This isn't great. And you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're like, this barber doesn't know what they're doing. And then suddenly at the end, the last 5 minutes, okay, yeah, it looks all right now. This is pretty good. What was I worried about? So yeah, those two things, the beginning and the end. Music starts with the person that's playing it first. Find really good players that know what they're doing, are creative, have got great instruments, and know how to play them, and will buy into the concept of one, sampling, because it's not something everybody does all the time, and then kind of like the actual recording process is tricky. Finding a studio that's going to suit that aesthetic and that whole kind of sound, and the Nave has just been the #1 place since day one. The engineers here, the team, the people that run it, the sound of it, the equipment they've got is absolutely next level. And they get what we're trying to do as well, and they really help us on that journey. What are we going to record? Like, how much can we record in a day? How much can we record over the 4 or 5 days that we've got with this person? And then for these 2 hours, we're going to do this. What's the sound we're looking for? And how do we get a consistent sound that isn't completely flat? Aiming for consistency, but not perfection. Because if you aim for perfection, 1, you'll never reach it, but 2, it will sound boring and not like real music, because there are no perfect notes in real music. And like giving the players like ideas about the kind of music that this would be used for. So I'm always giving the players like, imagine this being played behind a suspense scene where somebody's about to come out and murder your wife, or imagine this being played like by somebody who's running through a field to meet their parents for the first time. That sort of musical direction, so they've at least got some sort of intent behind the notes they perform. So it's recording all of that. This is a really long answer. Recording all of that as expertly as you can, and then just cut them all, rename them all. File management is like the #1 thing with sample library development. If you ever get into even just like a really simple one instrument, unless your file management is down, you've got no hopes. Then it's a case of putting them into your sampler, so we use Contact, and then it's a case of putting them in, mapping them across the keys, and then just fine-tuning everything so it's as fluid and as musical as possible. And that's what we aim for, is musicality, not perfection, not everything's got to sound perfect and like everything's got to sound as precise as possible. Leave some variation in there. So when you're playing it, that's the natural variation you would get from a real life performance in the studio. While that's happening, we're making UIs and deciding how much control the user should have, and that's always a massive conversation. You could give the user hundreds of different controls, but do they really want that? Do some people... Me personally, I just like to open up something and it sounds good, straight away, and I don't want to tinker loads, I don't want to have to. Once you've wrapped it up, it's how do you actually portray what the library is to other people? Because if they don't know what it is, they don't know what it's capable of, then nobody's going to buy it. Or they're going to buy it thinking it's one thing and it's another. And we try and do quite a heavy job of explaining to people exactly what they're going to get. So when they open it for the first time, there's not too many, hopefully there'll be nice surprises, but there won't be, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. You should know in our marketing and our videos, our walkthroughs and everything that, okay, yeah, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. So That, in a nutshell, that is sample library development. There's two things that it's got to hit for me. Number one is functionality, like can people find stuff quickly? Can they get to what they need to easily? Is stuff legible? Okay, I'm going to move this button or move this fader or knob or whatever, and I kind of know what it's going to do without having to use the user manual, because I know from experience people don't read user manuals. When I move this fader, is it going to do what I expect it to? Secondary to it functioning really well is just, as shallow as it is, I just think it has to look good, because you're going to be looking at it loads. It's just, I just like things that are aesthetically pleasing and look nice. Like the costs that involved with a sample library, obviously like paying musicians. We pay our musicians a solid rate for their time in the recording studio, as well as royalties as well. So every single product that gets sold, a royalty that the library that they're involved with will go back to them. It's obviously paying for the studio. There's paying for people's time afterwards to like help me create all the sample libraries. We've got to pay Contact their license fees. And if we buy however many licenses of Contact, you've got to pay them all up front to kind of make them license it. What I didn't realise starting a sample library company, what I naively didn't realise, is how much upfront cost there is before you see a return. We haven't thrown any projects away. We've thrown ideas away that in the recording studio didn't work. In the creative process before recording, it's like, oh, this idea is going to be really good. When it comes down to it in the recording studio, it's not working. There is a hard drive that I have that is full of successfully failed experiments. But yeah, no massive project that we've spent loads of money and time on and just had to can. One, you're kind of going, is this worth it? Is this just one person that's asked for this one feature? Nobody else has requested it. It's almost like bringing a meal back from the table and kind of having to unpick it all, to recook it, to then present it again. Now, my philosophy has always been to try and improve everything we've done, and we've done that with several libraries now where we've gone completely back to the drawing, like with alt piano. That got completely stripped back, right back to the original recording session, and we kind of started again. I know loads more now that I can apply to this to make it the library it should have been right from the start. But small bugs and things like that, I think sample library companies only do them if they can see the reward is good enough. It's like weeks. Like once you've actually gone, okay, we fixed the bug, or we've made that little improvement or something, you've kind of got to go through beta testing again to make sure that what you've done hasn't unpicked something else, through Native Instruments again. So it's weeks. The hardest part at the moment is the lead time for everything. And because what we're doing is bigger and more expansive, and our ideas are getting bigger and bigger, is that lead time between an initial idea and finally putting it on a server so people can download it is huge now. That's the difficulty now, is making sure that things overlap and there's always the next thing. And because studios get booked up, musicians get booked up, people's timelines and things change all the time, so it's just trying to manage that so things are happening all the time. Have a voice and know what you are going to do with it. Don't just be like, oh, I want to make the next best piano. Maybe that is somebody's vision, is I just want to make the perfect instrument. Maybe that is your vision, but at least you've got something to hold on to. So when people are looking at your company and your ideas, they know what they're going to get. If you name any of like the top brands in the world, you know what you're going to get from them. And that's important even with small companies, is that they have a voice, they have a vision, and they follow that through. I don't want to say too much, but the next thing for Westwood Instruments is big.